Welcome to episode 17 of Radio Omnicor. I'm your host, Colleen McClintock, and you're listening to the show that is guaranteed to teach you something useful and where you will meet an interesting and dynamic guest. In studio today, we are thrilled to welcome Dr. Hilton Rudnick, Omnicor's very own MD, and Professor Gertie Pretorius, who is a legend in the South African psychology community. She has been a registered counselling psychologist for the past 35 years and as a research psychologist for the past 7. In addition to her psychology background, she holds a master's degree in philosophy, specialising in ethics, which underpins her passion for managing an ethical practice. Prof Gertie is currently in private practice, where she facilitates the healing, growth, and resilience of her clients. This episode will focus on life scripts and how they show up in our relationships in the organization. Do you sometimes find yourself asking why people behave in the way they do at work? Prof Gertie is here to help you deepen your understanding about the games we play at work and where they come from. So welcome, Gertie. It's so wonderful to have you in studio at Omnicor. The journeys go back a long way with Hilton. And we're really thrilled to chat to you where you've come, what you've been up to. So thank you so much for joining us.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for asking me.
So maybe, Hilton, you want to start with a bit of an intro to Gertie, a little bit of your backstory. Find it interesting.
So yeah, me and Gertie go back a long way. Professor Pretorius was my mentor at the University of Johannesburg. She shepherded me through two theses. I think there's probably a better word for that, thesi. And we had a long working history together. I worked at UJ for 10 years. And in that time, I came to know that Gertie has an opinion on just about anything going in the world. You can ask her anything, and she's got a strong view on it, and normally a really well-informed view. And I think, in this age where the field of psychology is becoming so diverse, and the areas that applied psychology is going into, it would be fascinating to hear from Gertie just around all the ways she applies her thinking in the corporate space and in the work that she does. So I don't know if that serves as an introduction, but I'm really looking forward to the chat.
So Gertie, what have you been up to? What keeps you busy?
I've been in private practice for the past almost 4 years now. I left the university at the end of 2014 to retire. But my retirement is a total failure. I fail dismally at retirement because I'm busier than ever. I'm in private practice, and my business comprises of 3 different elements and pillars. Firstly, I have the typical counselling psychology practice, which assists in a therapeutic and counselling way people going through life crises, transformations, transitions, etc. The typical life, divorce, and so on. The second part of my business is a strong psycholegal practice, which keeps me very busy, in which I do both criminal and family work. So residence care and contact work, and criminal work, whatever the situation may be, both from the point of view of the victims and the perpetrators. And in the third pillar of my business is a CPD academy that I started, in which I do training of psychologists and registered counsellors and supervision for senior and young psychologists, and some mentoring in terms of establishing a business and establishing their practices. So that's what I do. That keeps me busy. I am also still a visiting professor at the University of Johannesburg, where I still do some lecturing, etc. And I also lecture at the University of Namibia, where I train their master's degree students, clinical psychology students, in forensic. They call it forensic work. I prefer to call it psycholegal work. Those are amongst other things that I do. I also still assist the HPCSA, especially with ethical and scope of practice things.
Wow.
And issues.
That sounds
So
very
I sit
busy.
on a few. Yes, I'm a bit busy. As I say, my retirement is a failure.
Let that be your worst failure. So when you speak, there's so many things that stand out for me, especially around resilience. I know you see yourself as a practitioner building your clients' resilience. It's important to you, and you see yourself as assisting with their healing. How do you manage your own process when you're dealing with these really difficult cases? How do you deal with your own resilience and, hearing all of those difficult stories? How do you take care of yourself in that work?
Colleen, that is a very pertinent question, because I do believe that one of the only ways, and I don't for 1 minute think that I do it right and that I get it right all the time, but I do believe that, and one of the existentialist principles of being here and now, and the second principle of being aware, is what helps us as practitioners. When I do difficult psycholegal cases, and they are all difficult, and I will much rather do murder than family cases because of the acrimony and the conflict that we find in family work. But when I do that, those cases consume me. I literally don't sleep because of the gravity of the recommendations that one have to make to the Honourable Court. Because it has to do about children's lives and about people's lives, people going to jail that should not, or people not going to jail that should, or children being placed in a residence with a parent where they should not be. So trying to discern the best interest of the individual is always a difficult thing, and so what assists me on a professional level is two things. Firstly, my ethics, and secondly, my professionalism, because I believe that if we arm ourselves as practitioners with those two things, we will always serve the best interest of the client. On a personal level, I travel a lot. I try to travel a lot, which has in itself, I think, lots of healing powers, because if you're away, you're away. And I try to travel, especially with my husband, to places where there's not even cell phone signals, like the desert and the bush and so on. And I find that that is helpful. But being in the here and now, according to those existentialist principles, assists, I think, all of us, if we can focus where we are when we're there. It helps us to background all other matters and foreground, just like we're sitting around this table here and we're busy with this podcast now, and that's all that matters now. I find that assists me.
Okay. So I'm going to jump right into some of the heart of the stuff that you're doing, and I'm particularly interested in the kind of criminal work and some of the big questions around criminal behavior and where it comes from. And I'd like your view, and I'm particularly interested in maybe your like, less than the theory, your personal experience of, I mean, if you take people who do criminal acts, I'm talking about severe criminal acts, maybe murder, hurt other people, all those kind of things. Do you have a view that they were born that way, or that, so the genetic, the behavioral genetic component, the socialization component, is it because of the environment that they're growing, or some weird combination of all of those? And then how can those things be remedied? I mean, do those people set off on some kind of trajectory that their life is set to go that way? And to what extent do you ever see it that those people completely have turnarounds?
Hilton, you go to the age-old question,
of course,
of determinism versus freedom.
Right.
Whether we're determined by genetic components and by our circumstances, which is a more psychodynamic view of the world, versus whether we're free. to make decisions and to choose to do good rather than evil, which is an existentialist point of view. In the 36 years that I've been doing this work, I think I've come to a few realizations. Firstly, evil does exist. We've seen evil. If you've seen parents who burn their children with cigarettes and so on, you know that you've seen evil. If you see predetermined murder, etc., you know that you've seen evil. At the same time, I believe that and I can honestly say, most of the perpetrators that I have seen in my life were victims at some stage, which brings us to that cycle of evil, that cycle of violence that we see so often. And I think that is why I've always been so interested in the research, and I've published in the fields of murder, women who kill, and psycholegal activities, because I do believe if we as psychologists don't understand the world of the perpetrator, we cannot assist the victim. Because of that developmental trajectory that you've referred to in terms of what people are exposed to influence their development. At the very same time, people who have been exposed to terrible things have the ability to make decisions that's not for evil and not for bad and not for crime, but for good and for constructive being in the world. So when you ask me what do I believe, I know that I'm giving I hope it's a balanced answer, but a answer that is an and one. Because I do believe that some people have the ability to choose to make existential choices and decisions that will be constructive, even if they come from terrible circumstances. And of course, this is a very Viktor Frankl-ish reply. Also, I just want to add to that. You asked me whether I believe that people can turn their lives around. I definitely believe that. I do believe that. And that is the question that the court asks a psychologist. And a good psycholegal expert can answer the question, what is the developmental trajectory? Will this person do it again? It's the same with family work. If you work with children that are 4 and 5 and 7 years old, the court needs to understand what will happen to these children when they make the following decisions in 10 years from now. It's not about now. It's not about the past. It is actually about the future. So psycholegal work, and if a good psychologist can answer the question, what will happen with this person in 10 or 15 years from now? And just by the way, you know that when I taught and trained psychologists, one of my favorite questions in oral examinations was always, with case studies, was always, okay, fine, so if you give me this case study now and you conceptualize this person now, please add 10 years to this person's life and tell me what's happening to him now or to her now. And I think that's one of the skills, conceptualization skills, that a psychologist needs.
So I think it's a good segue into the idea of life script, because even if we relate it to the kind of criminals that you see, and also on a more organizational level, where does this behavior start? Where do these scripts start?
I just want to go back before I answer your question in terms of, and I quote you, these criminals that you see.
Right.
The discourse that we have, I think we need to be very careful, because not all of those people that I see are criminals. They may have performed a criminal activity. They may have committed fraud, or they may have attempted murder, or whatever the case may be. But I'm very careful with the discourse that I use, because labeling a person who has committed a criminal offense as a criminal is not always correct. And then also just to say that the balance is about, once again, Colleen, and I'm coming to your question, but to get a balance between not only what is best for the individual, but also for society, and to take into consideration, for instance, our judicial system, our correctional services system, the situations currently in correctional facilities, and who do you place there, and how do you then remove from society human material that can still be useful on an economic level and on a work level. So it is, again, that kind of psycholegal work is not only about the individual, but it is also about balancing all those factors. Also the family of that individual and the children or the dependent parents of that person, how to balance all of that. So it's not only about conceptualizing from a psychological point of view the individual, but also conceptualizing bigger systems within which this individual functions and will function if the court decides that this person should serve a prison sentence, and what the effect of that is on the economy.
So it's very complex.
It is highly complex. Now, you asked about how do people get there?
Mm-hmm.
And of course, that's a difficult, there's no simple answer to that. But I've always been fascinated by the life scripts, the scripts that people live, the way in which we develop our own life script is highly complicated, and and there's many different explanations, theoretical explanations for this, and scientific explanations for this. However, there is a very strong body of research stating that already in the womb, at a very early developmental stage, the fetus have certain awarenesses. And please don't think for 1 minute that I'm talking about awareness the way we think of it now. I'm talking about pre-linguistic, primitive, and irrational awarenesses. And the link in the research is to that of the development of the amygdala, or the reptile brain, as it is popularly known, when the first experiences of the environment is already, or the first awarenesses of experience of the environment is already laid down with a fetus. And that talks about more or less 8 to 12 weeks that a fetus already has an awareness. For instance, am I at the right place at the right time? Am I wanted? Am I what they want? Am I, for instance, a girl and they expect a boy, etc., etc. And please, once again, this is very primitive and very pre-linguistic. And if we ask people about it now, they can't even put words to it. And this is the key to the conduct that you are referring to. We often do not understand why we do things. And one of the examples that I can use that you will be able to relate to, because you will know people like that. We always are so surprised that a woman who has been abused by her husband for 20 years leaves her husband and marries another one who abuses her, or puts herself in a position where she's abused again. So we often ask, so why? Why do people do that? And that I relate to life script, to very primitive pre-linguistic belief systems. For instance, that I'm not good enough, or I'm not wanted, or I'm not what I'm supposed to be. And then a bit later on in the development, we start doing a fascinating thing, Colleen. We start setting ourselves up to get that life script confirmed. In other words, and we set up our partners, and we set up our co-workers and our colleagues and friends to confirm that life script. So, for instance, if you believe that you are not good enough, you will find many people, as soon as they then achieve something that's good, they start sabotaging themselves again. For some reason, they find themselves in a position where they do not achieve, and they will fail on a very unconscious, primitive, illogical, and pre-linguistic level. That person can then say, you see, I'm actually not good enough. And so we also set up our partners, and we choose partners that will, say for instance, if our life script is one of we should be rejected, then we choose partners that we unconsciously know is not reliable and will reject us later. So we can say, see, I'm not good enough.
So if I had to listen to that conversation in isolation, I would be tempted to say, well, that's a strongly deterministic view, that in this pre-linguistic state of our lives where we're making decisions about how we're wanted, we're coming to the world as a certain package, and we live out and even the word life scripts, just like criminality, reifies a certain construct around this is the path. But there's another whole side to that, because we're therapists here, and therapists believe that people change and move on, and that those scripts in some way can be negotiated. So I don't believe that when I'm hearing you, that you hold on to the view that you're stuck in that kind of thing. What are some of the mechanisms that you use to help people move beyond those life scripts into scripts that are maybe more productive?
Thank you, Hilton, because thank you, because I do think that is a very pertinent question. You see, the whole thing of a script is that it's something that's written continuously. So one can look at it from the origins and the beginning of it as a deterministic thing. However, as you journey through your script and through life, and as you continuously every day and from decision to decision write your script, it brings us to a very important principle, and that is that what has been in the past cannot be changed. You know, I always say you can't unrape a raped woman. Or unmolested, a molested person. So what is part of our script, and that what has been written not only by us but also by our environment, cannot be changed. However, it can be used, and it can be used constructively to remake decisions. And this is where the whole principle of positive psychology comes in. And I'm a strong believer in things like post-traumatic growth rather than just post-traumatic stress. And again, the discourse that we follow and the discourse that we use can either be pathological and, as you say, deterministic, or it can be positive and existential. I believe it can be both, because in certain when we work with addicts, for instance, or when you have an addict and an alcoholic, no one applied to be an addict. No one decided one day, you know what, this is the life path I want. I want to be an alcoholic or an addict. However, one has been dealt certain genetic factors and certain developmental factors, etc., that made one an addict. But we all know that is something that can be managed. And a person under certain circumstances, when there's particular stressors, particular triggers, etc., may then relapse again. And that's part of the journey. And then you have to get yourself up, pick yourself up, dust yourself off, start all over again, new on the journey, not rewriting the script, but continue with the script. So paradigmatically, I really do believe that we are both determined and free to make decisions. I think Colleen wants to get to, so now what about this in the workplace?
You're very good at predicting people's behavior.
But what we see and the conduct, the way that we often see people conducting themselves in the workplace is not only based on it, because that again sounds so deterministic, but influenced by this tension between where we come from, who we are, what our genetics is, what our background is, what our family of origin is, what our belief systems are, our religious systems are, our cultural, all those things very strongly determine, in a way, the boundaries within which we will conduct ourselves. So any relationship and relationships in the workplace are transactions. It's transactions between people. And more particularly in the workplace, because a work contract, an employment contract, is exactly that. It's a transactional contract. It's, I will provide the following services, you will pay me the following salary, and I will have the following benefits for the work that I produce, etc. So we can often relate how people conduct themselves back to this kind of life script, and maybe a need to sabotage themselves, and then how to unhinge that, I think, from a psychological point of view, and almost the employee-employer relationship point of view, how to constructively move forward within a particular position.
So I think one thing as a leader I find particularly difficult at times is how do you, when you can see that there's that dynamic, perhaps there is a low self-esteem, a low confidence, and it does obviously infiltrate the workspace, how do you help people move past that as the leader? Is that something you can do? Or perhaps as a coach, is it something that you can help people with the awareness of this life script? Okay, so you're sabotaging yourself again. How, making them just aware, or is there something you can do more practically?
You see, once again, as a leader or as a coach, or in whichever position you are in relation to that person, you're in a relationship. And I think that is where the strength of human interaction lies. That's where the strength of transactional relationship lies. Because if a relationship, whether it's as a leader or an employer or a line manager or whatever the case may be, is one of trust, it is always, and it's never a top-down. I'm not talking top-down relationship. I'm talking about a relationship between two people, and some relationships are hierarchical more than others, and that's what you are referring to. But I think if one is a leader, one has a wonderful opportunity to hopefully be constructive and to facilitate people's growth and be a catalyst for people to move forward constructively. And that's not always an easy thing. Sometimes the best thing for a person is to leave the company in order to grow, or to not be promoted in order to grow, or to be promoted in order to grow. So whatever the situation may be, I think one is in a very unique and a wonderful position to be. In all my years when I was the director of the ICAC and the PsyCAD, I always felt so privileged, because one, or a supervisor for that matter, one has the opportunity to be witness to people's growth, and and we're all witnesses of each other's lives. Hilton, when you spoke earlier, I've had the privilege to be witness to your life, and you've had the privilege to be witness to mine. And that only happens if you form real, authentic relationships with people.
I mean, we hear so much more in contemporary leadership theory and practice how important relationships are in leadership. But in my experience, most managers are not psychologically equipped to deal with people. And as you say, most of the exchanges they have are very transactional. They're about goals, they're about delivery and execution. So there's a big ask, in a way, to take people who are just very task-oriented to even have the interest in understanding what's going on with these people who are reporting to them, and to have some kind of insight or try and understand their behaviors and where they come from and change them. Most line managers are not interested in that. They're just interested in getting the job done. And I don't know if there's even a question in this, but I'm kind of wondering, is it too much in a corporate environment to expect that line managers have the kind of insights, that authentic relationships, trust relationships, making the time for empathy and all those kind of things?
But Hilton, you gave your own answer because you talk about managers. You're not talking about leaders. And that is that's the difference, because some people have a job, and their job is to make sure that the targets are met, that the company's goals are achieved, and that's a job, and you better do it, because that's the transaction, that's the contract. And I think for those people, and I'll come back to that now, to the career implications now. For those people, they do not necessarily have an engineer who has no interest in people, and who have interests in structures and systems and so on, and artificial intelligence and so on, do not have an interest in people. So I think it is unfair to ask those people to perform on a level where they have to facilitate human growth, etc., etc. There's a different type of person that wants that. And from a career psychology point of view, we know that we choose careers very much based on our personalities and our interests and our values. So if a person chose a particular career which is non-people oriented, and they do that job good, the system fails them, because now the system puts them in a position where they're supposed to start being empathic and developing people, etc., etc. So when we appoint people, or when we promote people, and that is what I referred to earlier, Colleen, when I said we expect people to do certain things, sometimes it's not in their best interest to make them a manager, because an excellent psychologist does not make an excellent bookkeeper. And that's often why private practice or entrepreneurial activities don't go well with psychologists, and so on. So to uniquely place a person in a position where that person can thrive, and where some flow can happen, some psychological, positive psychology type flow can happen, one should not put them in a position where you expect them to perform duties which is contraindicated in their value systems and their personalities, etc.
I mean, I think that makes sense, but in reality, people are now expected to show up with a diversity of skills. So you are my leader. I've chosen you to run this team of 10. I'm sorry for you that you don't have an interest in it, but we're going to throw you on a leadership program, don't worry, and we're going to give you skills, and we're going to teach you how to do that. So that's what we see happening, and it's quite clear for us as consultants that person probably doesn't have the appetite or the ability to convert to the kind of coaching leader that you would want. But that's where you're in a double bind sometimes, because you may give feedback to the organization that's really not going to be a thing. Hilton isn't going to be that kind of leader, but the contract with the organization is you need to show up and do those things. I mean, that being said, so Gertie, I'm interested in just the drama that happens at work. You see all these drama triangles, there's lots of gossip sometimes in teams, people do unexpected things. They surprise you sometimes, as you said, surprising behavior. Do you buy into the whole victim triangle, the drama triangle? Is it something that you can use in coaching to identify where you are and help your behavior change?
Well, first of all, I just want to go back to what you've said about people are expected to show up and
Sure.
to have certain skills. I think the research is quite clear, and there may be other research that you're aware of, but I think it's quite clear that there are certain skills that you actually cannot teach because they're not skills. They're attitudes. They're a way of living. They're a way of life. For instance, not everybody has respect, and not everybody is respectful. Due to wherever they come from and how they were raised, and they come with their prejudices to a workplace, for instance. I mean, the whole thing of empathy. Empathy is a skill, but it's based in an attitude of compassion and care and respect. And those are not things that you can teach because they're not skills. It's not a technical thing. It's something that a person either are or is or is not. So I'm either a respectful, compassionate person or I'm not. And that's where the private and the private and the political self comes into play. Where we're in our private spheres, sometimes severely disrespectful towards certain groups. But in the social sphere, we know that we need to be respectful, so we are politically correct. But that does not make us compassionate and respectful people. So I think there's a whole field of research there, especially how this plays out in the workplace, that could be done. So I question whether you can just take a person and expect her or him to show up and be compassionate and respectful and a good leader by putting them on a leadership course. So the effectiveness of leadership courses, I question. What I think there's an answer to that, and that is selection for those leadership courses, to deploy people so that their best qualities can be nurtured and be utilized in the position that you deploy them in. I think we can easily set people up to fail by putting them in the wrong position. But now I've said all of that and I've got your question.
It was around dealing with the dynamics in organizations where there's, like you said, we set up our environment to find evidence for our life script.
Oh yes, of course, and the dramas will be there, and the triangles will be there, and the drama triangles will be there. And I think more than that, people's own personal needs will always be played out in the social environment of the workplace. Because if you put people within relationships, they will act in a way that will confirm their own life scripts, or where they get what they need, whether it is by inappropriate relationships, whether it is by not having clear boundaries, by the inability to set clear boundaries. Some of my work on sexual harassment in the workplace, for instance, and bullying in the workplace is around exactly that. Because you have a dynamic and a relationship of power where one person will abuse the power that he or she has, and the other person will submit to that power. So built into the whole workplace environment, where there's a hierarchical system, if you have a supervisor / line manager, that person has power. If you have a performance contract, the person who has to adhere to the performance contract and to the KPIs have to also please the person that will evaluate them according to that. So if there's performance appraisals, you set up a system where there's power and a potential abuse of power. Does that make sense?
100%.
So I don't know whether it's possible to escape at all from the drama in the workplace that you refer to. I do think, however, what is possible is to make people aware and to empower them so that they know how to deal with those in power and how to deal with their own position and set their own boundaries.
I mean, I think we've seen, so in our business we do a lot of the things that you're talking about. We do individual coaching where we help people grow. We do leadership development where, and by the way, our leadership development is a long program. It's not a weekend getaway where you become
a leader
like,
in a
right. No,
flash.
I mean, yeah, it takes like a year.
Yeah.
And certainly a lot of the things you're talking about, I think we encounter all the time. But we would certainly hold the view that if you cannot make someone's disposition change to being more empathic, you can teach them some of the behaviors that go with showing empathy and demonstrating. It's the same as listening. A lot of people are bad listeners, but there's some behaviors that you can do that'll help people become better listeners. And you'll remember when you were training us as therapists, how we spent months and months and months just teaching people the basics of listening.
The technicalities.
Right, just those kind of things. So I think we would have to hold and believe strongly as a business that you can mold leaders to some extent. There is some wiggle room where they can learn the behaviors, and probably dispositionally they're not going to change. They're always going to be who they are on the empathy spectrum, but they can learn effective behaviors that go with the role. I mean, would you hold that?
I'm in total agreement with you.
Yeah.
I'm in total agreement with you, and I think that is why we so strongly believe in development.
Right.
And in constructive development, and any input that one can give can facilitate growth. And I think leadership opportunities. If also people understand what a great opportunity it is to be selected to go on a leadership program like that and to make the most of it, and not see it as a job and not see it as something that you do because you want to develop for a particular company in a particular position, but rather what can be transferred from that into your own personal life to make you a more fulfilled human being. Which brings me again back to the existentialist point of view of people being fulfilled human beings.
So sadly, we've come to already the end of the session. I think we're going to have a part 2. Gertie, just to wrap up, a question around how do you find your life script? Do you need to go to a therapist to figure it out? Or is it just something that we kind of know?
I think once again, if one is more aware that something like that can be driving us, and if one starts questioning ourselves in terms of what is the patterns of relating that I have, how is this again a pattern? I'm relapsing again when I have the following triggers, or I'm choosing the same type of man again in my life who fulfills the following functions for me, etc. Or I transfer onto my children specific values and so on. And oh my God, I'm just like my mother. That kind of that kind of thing. That's when one becomes aware that there's a script, because it plays out in the patterns in which we relate to the world, to people, to gender, to groups, minority and majority groups, and to authority. And once, if one starts asking those questions, you're already moving towards discovering the script that you live by.
Well, that's a wonderful place to end the session. Thank you so much, Gertie and Hilton.
Thank you.
And we hope you enjoyed the chat.
It was lovely. Thank you for honouring me by requesting me.
Thank you.
Many of the leaders entrusted to run organizations have unconscious life plans, and these will have a tremendous influence on the fate of the organization. Prof Gertie has unpacked the why and potentially the how we can become more present to the transactions and contracts. Check out the show notes to find Professor Prof Pretorius. Should you like to reach out to her, please don't forget to comment and like our podcasts. You will find us on iTunes, and check out our website www.omnicor.co.za.